Okay, this game is over 24 hours old now, which means is it even relevant at this point? But it is interesting, and I want to take a look. I noticed, by the way, that almost all of my recent videos have been on G2. That's because they've been topical, and they've been in the final. Okay, it's not like I'm trying to do G2 games specifically. So, pistol round, I mean, I'm not going to really focus on these too much. You've got a slow control for Navi. They wanted to see if there was something going on at B. Didn't find anything immediately, and then they decided... I suppose if the decision was that if they didn't make contact B, they would go back towards A, and they'd use bit as a bit of a fake to try and draw a rotate if possible. This Glock looks really cool from JL, by the way, with the tiny Navi stickers. That's actually really cool. 3v1, Nico on the retake. I'm going to guess that he probably doesn't win this, but this is a situation where you probably kind of have to go for it, even though with no kit, the odds of winning this are infinitesimal. Although, actually, infinitesimal is probably pushing it a little too far. But still, with no kit, all they have to do is just not, like, give away any free kills, and Nico's pretty much screwed. And what they really want to do here, well, I wanted to say what they really want to do here is let the bomb explode. But if the bomb explodes, they might both die, and then, you know, they lose their armor. But actually, they upgrade their armor anyways, so probably... Theoretically, what they probably wanted to do was let the bomb explode, you get a little bit more money, but whatever, if you can find the kill, just get the kill. You know, you don't need to overthink it. Then you have a force buy from G2. G2 seems to be forcing pretty much always. I don't see two. So what I was thinking is, like, when I looked at it, statistically, you know, winning both pistols, even in MR12, although technically it's supposed to, you know, it's a higher percent of the rounds played, when you win both pistols and then win the anti-eco, it actually didn't lead to winning the game more often in CS2, at least for the first several months. And I thought that was because teams weren't forcing nearly as much. But now teams are kind of starting to force on almost every map. So I'd be interested, maybe I should go back and do that data again, although I think that certain apps have that data that you could just find, and it would be a lot easier than me actually going through manually. But regardless, we had a 3B stack for G2. You know, Navi took a little bit of control, and then G2 actually are going to rotate off. We saw them do this on Ancient, where they stacked A early and then made their way back over to B. And then that shadow from JL. Oh my god. They're actually going to lose this round because of JL's shadow. He was like millimeters away. You see that sometimes, like very often actually. Someone's like just a few millimeters away from peeking someone. They don't peek. Neither of them really realize what happened, and then you move on with your life. But because of JL's shadow on the wall, he actually gets spotted. That gives Nico the peek out, and that actually wins them the round. That is wild. Just like the millimeters that decide a round like that. Then you end up actually having pistols here for Navi. And I wouldn't be surprised if they try and exploit something very similar to what we saw Mongols try and exploit, which is, you know, an aggressive play towards apartments here, especially because, I mean, G2 have been trying to combat that. They've had Monesy in apartments quite often, just holding for that type of like walk lurk play, and it's done really well for them throughout this event. We'll see if G2 have their own kind of counter for that exact play, because I actually haven't seen this game. I didn't see this game live. But in the anti-eco, the G2 are going to play relatively passive. They're not going to play all the way back on site. If you remember the game they had against Mongols, they were playing all the way back on site, and they actually had Mulbs in pit get triple nade stacked because Mongols saw it coming. But they are playing quite far back, which can make you susceptible to these types of plays, and that's exactly what's going to happen. And I think this is one that I would expect this is a style of play that G2 have in their repertoire, but my guess is they do it a little bit less often after this event. If I was backseat coaching here, I'd say that what this is that when they're playing aggressive on anti-ecos, they're just kind of losing, and they haven't found a clear solution for that. And so the band-aid solution is to play kind of overly passive on these anti-ecos. And it's not that you can't have rounds like that where you do play relatively passive. In theory, playing passive does make a lot of sense. But then if your opponents know that this passivity is coming in and they're expecting it, then they're going to set up for those types of plays where they just have a full exec ready for you. And because they can hold on to that utility, they're feeling pretty comfortable, and they can actually kind of, you know, catch you off guard, catch you blind, and actually make things really work out. Because, you know, when the reason playing aggressive is effective, right, is because your opponents have enough utility for an exec, or they have enough utility to effectively counter your aggression, right? They probably don't have enough utility to counter your aggression and then execute. Otherwise, they wouldn't be on like an eco. Alexi B with a perfectly timed spam through the smoke. I thought this round was just going to instantly go G2's way because, I mean, Nico got the initial kill. He got 80 damage onto the second player as well. Spam from Alexi really keeps them in it, but Monesy, FAMAS in hand. Oh, that's a tough one because he probably wants to fall back there, but he can just tell the timing, especially if there's a flash coming. Like, in theory, I don't think Navi had a flash that was going to pop through that smoke, and Monesy probably could have fallen back. However, the reality is that when that smoke is blooming, you're kind of thinking in your head, yeah, a flash is going to pop right in front of me if I try and back up, and I'm just going to get blinded and taken down. So going for that peek makes a lot of sense. You catch them in front of that flash, especially if the player up front was, you know, throwing that smoke, then planning on throwing a flash himself, which isn't really, you're supposed to, first player always have your gun out is kind of the rule that you're supposed to live by. Second player uses the utility, or, you know, third, fourth, fifth player depending, but it doesn't always end up being like that when you get in these late round scenarios, stuff like 2v2s, things like that. So the anti-eco went pretty normally, I suppose. Not much happening for G2, and into the first, you know, well, not the first gun round, but the first gun round after that, they're going to go for that triple up B. G2 is definitely a team that loves to triple B quite often, and you do have this response into apartments where you have 3 players apartments for Navi, but they're not going to go, you know, all the way through. They're not going to do that type of like apartments pop or anything. It's just going to get a little bit of control here, and I think they can kind of sniff out what likely setups are very possible given the circumstances. That's the kill on Snacks. Now, Snacks typically is going to be the player that actually goes B, more so than Monesy. However, Monesy will go sometimes, so they might still be thinking that there's very possible that there's still 2A, although that is somewhat surprising given that, you know, Hunter had 0 control of Banana. The exec out, they just have really good spacing to ensure trades, and they were, you know, G2 were already down a couple of players, so you need multiple players to over-deliver to really get anything done there. Malbs does get, you know, he gets 2 for himself, but 2 simply not enough in that circumstance. And Hunter, this is one where I can actually, you know, you can definitely justify going for it in this scenario because if you feel like you have a chance, I think if Hunter had a kit, I wouldn't be too surprised to see him go for it. In this type of situation, you have so little money, you have legit zero money on everyone. What do you get by saving? Well, you have an M4 into the following round. That's cool. It's even more meaningful, like it's even less meaningful if you're on like a 1 or 2 round, like a 2-round loss bonus, I feel like, because then you're gonna have what, 4 USPs in an M4. Is that worth more than the opportunity, maybe like a 20% chance to win the round? You know, there can be some debate around that. Whereas, you know, if the gun makes a difference, right? If you can go for a buy because that player can drop a gun over it, that's going to be a very different scenario that you want to play pretty safe in, and not, you know, you want to lean towards saving over, you know, going for that. But still, you've got some pistol armor here for G2, and an M4 alongside pistol armor would always be quite nice. And not only that, but the M4 plus you could have had some utility on that M4 instead of just, you know, you've got very, very light utility across the board for G2 here. But it is what it is, you know? Malbs dies in apartments, totally reasonable. He's going for a little play. This is a nice, that angle is just so common now. Not the angle where he like peeks up from it, but that angle where he holds that so many people are now like pre-aiming that. And it used to be like back in CSGO, like especially early on in CSGO, nobody knew about that angle. It was so sick. It was so sick. You got so many kills playing that angle. And now it's like I play that angle and I just get pre-fired and I'm like, oh God, yet again, everyone plays here. I guess just because there's so many fewer angles to actually defend from that that's one of the angles that you actually feel like you have an advantage. You can actually get something done. As opposed to in CSGO where you just had a million different angles you could defend from. Felt a lot more comfortable. 6-1 already from Navi. This is the type of lead they've been getting out to in a lot of the games throughout this tournament. Now, against G2, it seems to have often been the opposite. G2 in the... well, actually, no. On Nuke, G2 also went down 6-1 to begin with and then tied it up on CT side. It was Ancient where G2 started out with a big lead. Now, this is the angle I'm talking about. Monesy's really been enjoying this angle. This time he's actually got Malbs with him. And it's not that there's 3B. It's not a B stack. And I don't even know if Hunter started over towards B. I think he might have been Arch the home round. But regardless, this isn't something you only do on B stacks, because you can be running a B stack with multiple different looks, right? You need to have multiple different looks when you stack B, otherwise you're a little bit too readable. And actually it's Bit in Apartments that's going to get the kill. Okay, so they do just this straight up walk. Like Alexi B, they're just going to walk up lane, and it seems like, yeah, Navi have smelled this one. They've sniffed this one out. They know this is exactly what's happening. Bit with the straight up pre-fire. There must be, I don't know, am I going to say there's a tell? I'm not sure if there's a tell, or if it's just a really smart read from Navi, where they know that, you know, G2 or Navi have been multiple times now, several gun rounds in a row. They've been double, tripled up in Apartments. They've gone through Apartments multiple times. You're expecting that Monesy eventually is going to go for that Apartments play. And if you've done it several times before Monesy has an op, a good time for Monesy to go for that type of Apartments angle is right as soon as he gets his first op. He's going to want to try and change the tides, change the way the game is going, and that's just a really, really good counterplay from Navi. And that's, I mean, look, some people in the comments, I've seen a couple of them, and they're reasonable. It's, you know, look, like G2, they just weren't quite themselves in the series. It's not like Navi were necessarily playing the best CS ever, which is fair. They weren't, I mean, they're not playing completely perfectly. However, you have to see that a lot of the things that G2 are struggling with are things that Navi are doing very specifically to counteract what G2 has been finding success with within this tournament. And that's one of the plays that G2 have been finding a ton of success with, is that Apartments angle. And just the way, you know, the way tournaments progress, I think it's not something I have a ton of experience with, but it does seem to be something where teams, you know, they, especially Navi, but teams kind of adjust throughout a tournament, and you can kind of track that along sometimes, that they're not playing completely the same throughout a tournament. And, you know, when you're getting more and more comfortable, especially with like a newer roster, I'm guessing what kind of happens is that you have a newer roster, you're kind of still slotting into the plays that you find successful. Because when it comes to CS, right, the reason people ask me all the time, how do I get back into CS after a break? Or how do I learn a new map that I've never played before? And there's never an answer other than just play, because different things work for different people. You need to know how far you yourself hold your crosshair from the corner to find effectiveness, what angles, what plays feel comfortable for you. I think the same thing goes with teams. You can have an IGL, bring him in, he can run a play, and maybe with his last team that worked really well with very little practice, but maybe with this team it works kind of poorly. So I think, especially with a new roster like this, I think you might still kind of be feeling out what plays from Hooksy you want to be running and what plays from Snacks kind of just slot in really effectively. And so you might be over-relying on those potentially a little bit into, you know, later stages of a tournament. And I wouldn't be surprised if that's the case. But again, I'm just kind of speculating here. Now we got G2, 2 players A. And Navi are just, man, they're running it back. Holy. Over and over and over through Apartments. And keep in mind, I think it's really important when you look at how... Okay, Malbs. Is this real? Is this real life? Oh, okay, we gotta watch that one back. All right, Malbs just 4Ks here. They have no business. They have no business winning this round. They only have 2B. What was that shot, dude? What was, dude. I want to see the commentary on this one. That is such a sick shot. Oh my god. Look at this, no X-ray on. It's a quick counter strafe. Dude, his aim is so snappy, man. This is like Rops. This is Rops phase 15-14 down, I believe, in the semi-final of the major, or was it the grand final, but like map 1 or whatever. On Inferno, Rops gets that 4K from that exact position. You can make yourself real hard to hit in that situation. You know, you can make yourself real hard to hit. Anyways, Navi, so when you look at these types of plays, like Monesy went for that angle in Apartments. He held the angle. He was in the play that was kind of attempted to be the counter for what G2 were doing, right? Navi or Monesy was trying to counter that type of apartments lurk. He was there, but it didn't work, right? So even though they had the counterplay, it didn't work out. And so part of the reason you run those sorts of plays is like as a deterrence. That's why the op is kind of like a strategic asset. You run plays where the op is in positions as a deterrence for plays that your opponents might run that are going to be hyper effective when the op isn't there, right? And so if you run that play and it doesn't work, then the deterrence factor no longer exists in quite the same way, you know? And I was noticing on Ancient, it felt like when that type of thing happened, then Monesy sometimes would just go right back to the same angle. He did that on Ancient a few times, and I think that had a little bit of something to do with it. Previous round, that isn't what happened. Man, Monesy, he's just not found his consistency, I guess, because he's still hitting. It really is like Monesy can have really kind of a very weak game, but every shot he hits just looks like prime Kenny-esque. It just looks like a ridiculously amazing shot every time he hits one, and then he'll just turn it up and just have like an insane clutch every game. And it's just like the memorable moments per game from Monesy, or per you know, like in hockey you have like goals per 60, which is like, because you only play like half the game, right? So it's like every 60 minutes, every full game you were on the ice, how many goals would you get? And Monesy, like memorable moments per 13 rounds or per 24 rounds, I guess. It's like gotta be off the charts, you know? That's like ridiculous how many memorable moments he has. Anyways, Nico in the perfect backside to prevent the plant. 10 seconds left. It's really on Snacks and Monesy, though. And Monesy with only 20 health, it's more on Snacks than on anything else. And I think Bit is actually full blind here. But he's just in the exact right position. Yeah, he's not full blind, but he's in the exact right position. And now Monesy, 20 health. You kind of want to save here, but it's one of those spots where it's like, damned if you do, damned if you don't, because you have very little chance of actually winning this round. 20 health with the off in hand. With or without an off, the chances of winning this are so low. But if anyone's going to win this type of round, it definitely is Monesy, right? And I was talking in one of the previous ones on Ancient specifically, I was talking about this idea, like, when you look at it, Monesy sometimes, I think, part of what makes him so strong in the clutch is he breaks those timings where you think, oh, you know, he's made contact with my teammate, you know, now I can peek out. Sometimes it just feels like he's so fast at switching between which angle he's focused on. He can actually really catch people off guard with that. And that, I mean, that's exactly what you're thinking is going to work if you've got 20 health, right? You need to basically just insta-headshot people. That's generally why I tell people, if you're low HP, you want to be playing more aggressive, not less aggressive. Not in terms of like rushing people, but more aggressive as in, if someone peeks into you, you are definitely dying, right? So if you're on 20 health, don't let people peek into you, peek into them. Similar idea. But in this round, we've got a 3v1 after a heavy contest in Banana, and Navi notably will be aware that G2 only had 2 players there, which I think is kind of, I mean, benefit for G2 that they actually got so many kills. I think they got 3 kills there, 1 in mid on the B hole, with a play from Navi that's kind of intended to mostly counter what G2 was running, to counter that type of like kind of semi-aggressive 2-player contest at top Banana. If you run heavy Banana control, you're kind of looking to deal with that exact type of play. If there's a 3rd player there, then you're probably, it's going to be a lot harder, you know? I feel like that's fair to say. One of the nice things about the UI, by the way, so if I open this up when I'm on a certain player, they've updated this. It actually shows where the next kill is. So when there's these long halftime breaks, anyone that's watching this that actually looks at demos like this is actually super interesting, because you get it updates the highlights like throughout, so you can constantly see where the highlights are for that unique player. Yeah, I don't know. I just thought that was cool. I think most people probably, even if you do review demos, you might not have noticed that yet, because for a while that just wasn't showing up at all. But anti-eco, wait, I missed the pistol. Okay, so you know, yeah, we got this right. Let's pretend we got this right the first time. 9-3. Pistol run. Wait, what's going on here? Yeah, okay, Alexi B is just there for support, and they're going for information in towards all. Bit with the tail as old as time. The play as old as time. Dude, man, what is this? What is this view model? What, bro? It looks so comical with the USB, dude. Some guns, it just looks so much more comical than other guns, you know? But spotting it out, he spots them out in alt middle, and they immediately move the stack over to a 4-man A stack. And then they actually pivot back. So I keep getting this idea that maybe Navi has some idea of like timings that G2 go for. Some of this might just be kind of, you know, they've got ideas of their own unique from G2, but some of it does feel like they've got ideas like, oh yeah, on these plays they do X on at certain timings and so on. But I don't want to talk too much about that. It's kind of getting into a very abstract thought process unless unless I'm actually going through the demos and showing you exactly what I'm talking about. Anti-eco, thinking I'm just gonna scroll through this pretty quickly. Even G2 wouldn't be able to lose an anti-eco against Glocks like that. Although, actually, I mean, the one against Mongols, it was more than just Glocks, right? It was like Glocks and some armor and some utility, stuff like that. Onto the gun round, G2 are going to open up. I mean, Nico is one of the premier banana defaulters, and he's generally very effective at dodging utility. And with some support, he does a very good job of getting a lot done. Now, he just jumped the corner, which is highly dangerous, to be clear. If you fight against an Opera and you jump check that corner, you're going to die a lot. But he spotted 3 players B, and it looked like they were, G2 was making it look like they wanted to run right back over towards A. But the smoke top mid, there needs to be, it's actually super underrated at higher levels. I think in Pugs, this is really not that necessarily relevant. You're almost never going to see this in Pugs, but you need to have kind of cross-map consistency. So your teammates are getting aggressive at B. Then on the A side, what you're trying to do is you're trying to stuff the hit. You're trying to do something like jiggle with the smoke out. You're trying to delay your opponents and make it so that once your opponents do show up, that you can buy a bit of time to get your teammates to rotate over. And then if that type of thing happens where they 3-man get spotted, or let's say, for example, your teammates, they get 2 kills or something on B, then you just might toss that smoke down immediately just to, again, buy that little bit of extra time for the rotate to come back over, because the response from your opponents is that, okay, we spotted 3B, or okay, we're getting rolled over at B. What we want to do, we want to respond on the other side of the map and take some control back, or maybe, we want to try and get something done, make a desperation play, something like that. And if you have some cross-map consistency where it's just you get aggressive on the B side and on the A side you're playing, sometimes you do, like, it's not that pro teams won't sometimes play aggressive on A while they're aggressive on B. That's like a balancing thing, more or less. But most of the time what you really want is when you're aggressive on B, typically, as a general rule, you play a little more passive on A, or the other way around, just so you can actually make things work, and not have something go really well at B and then immediately you just lose every advantage you have on A, which is something you see very often if you watch like ECL or advanced teams. It's not that they don't know about cross-map consistency, most likely. It's just that they, sometimes struggle with actually executing it quite correctly. And I've seen comms in some of these team speaks. Sometimes the comms are just not there. The other side of the map doesn't really explain what they're doing or what their opponents have seen, and people can get caught off guard still. But in this round, 11-4, Navi probably feeling pretty good when you start out a 9-3 T side. In fact, this is probably how Navi was feeling when they started out, 10-2 against FaZe in the grand final of the major. But on the opposite side of the map makes it even better. Wonderful here. Bit of a risky play. He's taking a bit of a risk by playing up there, but it makes a little bit of sense. I mean, it does make sense generally because they were already stacking towards B anyways. That's a play where if that goes well, Wonderful can get a double kill there, drop off, and then a lot of the time it's going to be like 2 through top mid, 2 through apartments, so you might get that double. And then with that double, you can actually take mid control and kind of shut things down. It's also just a nice off angle where you might be able to, get a couple of kills, especially if your opponents move into mid without throwing full utility. If you can get a double there, you can actually make it a winnable retake for your teammates. But in that case, solid utility on the mid take for G2 makes it almost impossible for Wonderful to get anything done. And then sometimes when you go for plays like that, it just, he gets blinded and G2 don't instantly kill him, so it just looks kind of dumb because he's just like running through the middle of the open full white. But it is what it is, right? Yeah, you've got to take risks like that sometimes, or or you run the risk of being just, too counterable. 11-5 now. G2 actually are making something work, but it doesn't, they haven't yet found that successful play. Generally, when you're looking at like a standard way to call for IGLs, you're often looking for like a play that works really effectively. And once that play works really effectively, you can use that to kind of build a half out. So like if a B rush works really well, right? Then the next, you might run a B rush once, it works really well. Then you could run it a second time, but you might run like an aggressive play for banana control, but you stop with top banana control. And then so your opponents are prompted to use with like an extra amount of utility because they were expecting the B rush, and then you go back and you hit B late, right? Or you might like fake banana control and then rush A because you're thinking your opponents might be running 3B to start the round. So you can kind of build around, like IGLs typically will think about building a half around like you find a successful strat, and then you use that, you like fake it, and then you run different variations of it. Because you can kind of toy with the way your opponents are going to be using their utility. And in order to do that, you obviously have to find a successful strat that works like on a fundamental level first. But anyways, 5v3, make it a 5v1. And if I can find where Monesy is, he just can't get it done. I mean, it's just not that winnable a situation. But this is something that I talked about this like a lot back in the day, back when hard resets were a thing. You lose a round, or you win a round, and then you all of a sudden you're back on 1400 loss bonus, right? That was terrifying. The most terrifying thing in CS at that time was like you're down 7-0 and you win a round, but it's just like it's a round where like strategically it doesn't work, but someone just like wins a 1v3 and you're like, well, now we're fucked. Now the game's over. Then you're like, now actually the game is just over because we're getting rolled over and we didn't find a strat that works. What we found was that someone made a hero play and it actually won us the round, but now we're on a 1400 loss bonus. So now we're just about to lose another round. We have no chance of winning, and we're just going to lose 14-1. That was like the most terrifying thing in Counter-Strike. All right. Almost missed this entire round, but, it is what it is. Alexi B had, I don't know statistically, but I just keep seeing rounds from Alexi B in this final where he just absolutely destroys people. Or does that, apparently. I take it back. Malbs really heads up play. Fake the bomb plant. He knows someone's top banana. I thought he might be caught off guard by that, and that would just be the end of the game right there. Instead, despite getting pressured from both sides, or from CT as well, he makes the heads up play, fakes the bomb plant, gets the information. Monesy actually gets smoked off, but he peeks before the smoke, and then he's going to swing through, and that got a little bit awkward, right? Because Malbs is thinking here, Malbs wants to throw a piece of utility and delay a little bit, but Monesy's thinking, okay, I'm going to come through and we're going to fight together. But Malbs doesn't have a gun out, which means if Monesy just dies there, that is actually... I mean, it's still a 1v1 where Malbs generally has a bit of an advantage, and I think Immo is even injured, but it's still, you go from a 2v1 where you're almost guaranteed to win to like just a little bit of, no, I wouldn't even call that miscommunication, because I think that's one that's kind of like unspoken. It needs to just, I feel like, kind of be one of those things where you're on the same page, and they just weren't quite on the same page, I think. With the play that they were making there. Or maybe, who knows, maybe Monesy knew that Malbs was throwing the flash and he was just going for the play on his own anyways, and saying Malbs is going to win the 1v1, which, Malbs had a pretty good event. But on the other side now, we've got G2 going for their variation of the exact same style of aggression that Navi was going for, but they get Hunter up in this position here. Does a slightly different peek than Bit did. Bit was really ready for Monesy to be holding that crouch peek angle. Most teams aren't running an opper in that position that often. G2, well, I don't know. This might be something. Sometimes you come off of a player break, you have a bit of a shift in the meta. But when I've seen other teams G2 have been playing against since the player break, I think they're usually holding that with a rifle rather than an op. So that pre-aim against a rifler is probably exactly where he's going to be. But Hunter goes for the lurkout apartments. I can see exactly why he goes for that. But when it goes wrong, it does set up his team kind of unfortunately. And that's a play, you know, right or wrong, whether that goes well or poorly. I do like to see Hunter go for that because I do feel like sometimes Hunter gets locked out of series because he's playing a little too passive and he just never gets a chance to actually get anything done. And one of the things that I did like in this event it did feel like Hunter was actually getting a little more confidence in going for those types of plays. And sometimes they failed, and it sucks when they fail, but it is maybe a sign that of positive outlook for Hunter fans, that he's not, scared to be making those sorts of plays, and he's willing to get aggressive with this new roster. But it's pretty exciting to see how G2 are going to do as we move forward with the new roster and they get more comfortable. But also Navi, it would be pretty awesome if we could see Navi get some consistency, because man, they just play some to me, they play some of the most coordinated CS, like especially with their utility, like the consistency of their utility, the variations of their utility. They just seem to be such a well-oiled machine with the way they do things compared to even other top teams. Love to see Navi do well. I'm going to put that as an outtake at the end because there's no way I can start the video with... Oh, by the way, one of the most underrated Glocks in the game, the Twilight Galaxy. This thing's beautiful. I sold mine. I have no idea why. It was the dumbest decision of my life. Okay. You know what else is really dumb? First of all, Monesy, this looks like the couch view model or whatever. I don't know if it is. But with the dualies, why don't you just hold them dead center? Like, imagine you're holding two guns. I'm just saying, imagine you're holding two guns, okay? Think about, if you've ever seen Boondock Saints, he's like, one guy with two guns, he wouldn't, if he was shooting someone in the back, if he was shooting someone in the back of the head, the bullets would go straight. He wouldn't flare out his elbows. What the hell is that? But in CS2, man, you flare out your elbows with the dualies. Why are you holding it to the left or to the right? Imagine, think in your head if you're holding two guns. Are they off center for some reason? What do you have, your elbow in your stomach so you can hold it to the left? What is that?